François Joyaux, many of us know because he has been to ONS meetings in the UK, and also he is one of the driving forces behind the journal Numismatic Asiatique, and which publishes in French and in English, and has had conferences as well, so annual conferences also. He's done a lot of work sort of between the English-speaking and the French-speaking worlds in East Asian numismatics, and he's been a very welcome member. So, François, the floor is yours.
I'll always start with the same sentence. I'm very sorry for my English, you know, which is horrible. I know it's horrible, but so my topic is a catalog of private Annamese cache. This catalog has been made since 2 or 3 years now, but because of the COVID crisis, I was unable to publish, to edit it, and so it's the first time today I'm talking about this catalog. Can you understand what I say, really? During, as you see, during many centuries, a very large part of the Annamese monetary mass has been composed of private cash. The monetary mass in present Vietnam, in Annam, the Empire of Annam, was mainly Chinese. Second was private, and third position was Vietnamese, Annamese. The Annamese cash was a very small part of the monetary mass during centuries. Those private cash, you can find them in many catalogs, some of them in many catalogs, mainly Japanese catalogs. The most important, which is very well known to everybody interested by this question, is the Muragosen catalog, but it's now 60 years old. Now, the best source about those private cache is probably the Zeno Point Roux site of Vladimir Belayev. There is a lot of private cache on it. To write such a catalog, there is huge problem of classification. In Japan, the classification is by styles. But the problem is there are many styles. The differences between those styles are not always very clear. There is a lot of intermediate varieties of style, and many, not most, but many of them are very difficult to be recognized by Westerners. A second idea is classification by period, a chronological classification, but this is impossible just because we don't know the date, the exact dates of those private cache. So I have chosen a third issue, if I can say, a classification by Nien Hao. The Nien Hao is what you call in English reign title. Generally, the first two characters, north and south, on the coins. Let us say it's the legend of the coin, which is on every cache. But the problem is that with private cache, the reign title doesn't correspond to the date of the cache. So a chronological classification, it's impossible. For instance, the coin of the previous slide, it's a coin of, it's a copy, a private copy of an Annamese cache of 15th century. But the private cache itself, it's a different unknown date. So the chronological classification, it's impossible. So I chose an alphabetical order for classification. For instance, this one, the name of this cache is Truan Truan in Vietnamese, but in Chinese, it's Guangshun. Guangshun, and for that name, for that legend, Guangshun, you have a lot of transcription. You have the Chinese official Chinese transcription, but you have also Old English or French transcription. So I chose the alphabetical order of the official Chinese transcription of today, I mean of People's China. And inside each legend, each Nianhao, I adopt a classification by types. Types, a type, the definition of a type is according 4 criteria. The metal which is used, the category of script. Chinese have a lot of script, different scripts. I will go back to that. The reading direction of the legend of the Nianhao, and number 4, the module and the weight, but both are associated. Most of the private cache in Vietnam is in copper alloy, bronze, brass. But the difference between bronze and brass is not always easy, just because the alloy is not it's not always the same. It's not homogeneous. So I call them copper alloy, generally speaking, bronze and brass. For instance, this coin, which is a very common one, Anfa Yuan Bao, is in bronze. Many other, the most common is copper alloy. In second, you can find private cache in zinc, especially in the south of Vietnam. For instance, this same money, the same legend as the previous cache, and Yuan Bao, for me, in this catalog, it's a different type just because it's a different metal. Very few are in lead, and during the last 10 or 15 years, a lot of new private cache has been found in Vietnam in lead. This is more or less new. The last metal is in tin, but it's very rare, very few. For instance, this one is a Kangxi. Kangxi is emperor reign of the 17th century. Kangxi Tongbao, it's a very common cache in China. This is a copy, a private copy of this Chinese coin, Vietnamese copy. For the definition of a type, I use also the script. In China, you have many kinds of script. You can say tens and tens, but some of them are more important. For those private cache of Annam, the commonest script is the Kaishu, regular script. For instance, this is a money of, it's a copy, a private cache, a copy of the Kaiyuan Tongbao. This is a money of the Tang dynasty, Chinese Tang dynasty. But you can find also those private cache with sealed scripts, Juanshu. This is relatively frequent. This is the second kind of script which is important for those private cache. This is another Yuan Dongbao, but in sealed script. This is also a Kaiyuan Dongbao, but it's written in Li Shu, official script. This is rare, but for me, it's a different type in this catalog. Another type of script is running script, Xing Shu in Chinese. This money is in Xing Shu script. And finally, this in grass script, that's very rare, in fact. And the problem of classification is very hard, just because you have not a lot of legends. You can say it's such or such script, and so we call them heterodox script, Yishu in Chinese. For instance, you can find Yuan. The character Yuan here is quite. It's very easy to understand, but here Kai, it's almost impossible. Tong, it's more or less, and Bao, very difficult. So you have a lot of cache, private cache, like this one, which are very difficult to classify. Another criterion of classification is the reading direction. There is only two reading direction. This one is the cross reading, which is 90%. 90% of those cache are in cross reading. That means north, south, east, west. Here is Shao, Yuan, Tong, Bao. With that kind of reading, you have 90%. But some of them are clockwise reading, north, but east, south, and west. For this means Yuan Bao. But it's very rare, more or less 10% of this kind of cache. Next slide, please. And the last point for the definition of the type is the module. How do you pronounce module in English? Module, 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 module. And weight.
Maybe diameter.
Generally, in pardon.
Maybe diameter.
Diameter. In China or in Vietnam, a normal cache is 23, 25 millimeters. But with private cache, you have many small cache of 20, 22 millimeters. So I consider in this catalog that you have two different types, what I call normal in comparison with other cache, and small. But of course, the difference is not always very clear. That's another difficulty also. So you see the difficulties are there are many difficulties. For instance, you can find a small diameter, but an important weight. So how to classify in large or in small category? You have a lot of mixed scripts, what the Chinese call zashu. So it's impossible to classify according to the script. You have a lot of heterogeneous alloys. Just because there is no regulation, no rule for this kind of cache. So everybody is doing what they want. So the result is There is a lot of alloys which are not homogeneous. And one of the main difficulty is that Annamese, private Annamese cache is a copy of, generally a copy of Chinese cache. But between a private Annamese cache and a Chinese fakes, make in China, the difference is very often very small. So you don't know if you are in front of a private Annamese cache or a Chinese fake. And there is a lot of fakes in China, but there are also fakes in Japan, Indonesia, Java, even in Russia, in the Far East in Russia. So, for instance, Andrei Ivlev has written articles about Russian copies of the Amur River Valley. You are unable to say if they are Russian or Vietnamese. It's more or less the same kind of copy. This is another problem for classification. This is an example, for instance. On the left, you have the Annamese private cache, but on the right, on the screen, you have the Japanese copy of the same money. You see the difference between those two caches are so tiny, so small. Another example of difficulty, for each type, there is sometimes, not always, but sometimes you have until 10 or 15 varieties of characters. Of course, those varieties are maybe difference due to difference of periods, difference of region, I don't know. But anyway, this is another difficulty. If you take in account those varieties, probably you have thousand and thousand private cache which are different. So in this catalog, you have 200 Nianhao, 200 different legends. I found 203, but maybe there are some more. Only 40% are Annamese, 30% are Chinese, and 45% are fictional. I mean by fictional, this is rank titles which doesn't exist in Annam or in China. It's absolutely a fiction, and 9% of values. If you take in account the types for each Nianhao, each legend, at the end you have more than 500 types of money. But probably it's not complete. I'm sure we can find some more in the coming years. So at the end, this catalog is organized like that. For each type, this is the first one, 01A. Anfa Yuanbao. I put it in Chinese, transcription of Chinese characters, the French translation, that's how to say primordial, first cache of Anfa. Anfa, for instance, is a ring title which doesn't exist at all. It's a fiction. After that, I have the metal, copper. After that, the script, which is regular here. regular script, but except for the character Yuan in the south, which is in Juanshu, I mean seal script, and for the character Bao, which is in official script. And the reading direction, and finally the diameter, and of course the figure of the cache. The next one, but I think that's the end. At the end, we have a catalog of circa 400 pages with 3,000 illustrations. The subject of this talk will become an article published in the journal, as Joe Cribb told me, at the end of this year, and it will be published in English, and better English than mine. And the same article will be published in French in our September issue of our journal, Numismatic Asiatic. And the catalogue itself will be available at our society at the autumn, September, or at least October. It depends of a lot of things, the COVID, etc. Next, but the next is next slide, but it's the end. And my thanks. I would like to add just one thing. I have to prepare this catalogue. It has been made with the help of Craig Greenbaum in the United States, especially for the Japanese catalogs, and we have found a lot of information in Japanese catalogs. And another important source for this catalogue is, I repeat, the Zeno-Ru site of Vladimir Belayev, and especially there is a special chapter which has been made by Andrei Ivlev about this kind of cache. So thank you to those people, and thank you to you, just to try to understand my English. I am sure that was the main problem during this talk. The problem is not the problem of private cache, but of my English. Thank you.
Thank you very much, François, for a very interesting talk.
Thank you, Helen.
Congratulations on the almost publication of the book, and we look forward to the articles. Thank you also for presenting in English, which is wonderful for us.